This is TV Podcast Industries, and we're talking about Star Wars The Bad Batch, Episode 13, Infested.
That's her. She's the one you want.
It has come to my attention that you have stolen our shipment of spice. Return it to us, and we will consider this issue resolved.
Not sure what he's been telling you, but we don't have any spice.
Kill them all.
Wait, we don't have the spice on us, but we know where it is.
My patience is wearing very thin. If you know where the spice is, then you should have no problem retrieving it.
Welcome back, fellow troopers. This is TV Podcast Industries. We're talking about Star Wars The Bad Batch, Episode 13, Infested. I know it sounds like I'm saying invested, but it's not. It's infested. Not cockroaches, not stockbrokers. Something in between. An alien, if you will. Ooh.
Oh, God, an infestation of stockbrokers would not be a fun place to be, would it?
I don't know. That's Wall Street for you. The Galactic Wall Street Empire.
There you go. I think that was Phantom Menace, wasn't it?
Oh, God, that was. It was the Trade Federation. Welcome back, fellow troopers. Yes, we are here, and we're talking about The Bad Batch. I am Chris, and I am joined by the illustrious, the Editor Supreme, the Sith Lord, the ultimate Derek.
Oh, thanks, Chris. Yes, just two of us here on the fully vaccinated TV podcast industries. We're all three of us fully vaccinated. So John has taken a break and gone and played golf. It's as if we've been holding him captive for the last year doing podcasting. We've been waiting on his vaccination because he ran out the doors as soon as his week was up after taking his Pfizer and went and had played golf. So you've got just the two of us for Star Wars.
Yes, and it's a good thing. Now he is fully vaxxed. His 5G signal is huge, and we can get him anywhere. We can contact him anywhere on the planet.
In the middle of a golf course.
It is. It's fantastic.
It's pretty cool, isn't it?
But we're not here to talk about our vaxes or 5G signal. No. We're talking about The Bad Batch, and we are in the final act, if you will, of The Bad Batch, and things are getting buggy. How's that?
Yes, they are. You know, it's really funny, fellow troopers. Myself and Chris have been just setting up the last 20 minutes, just chatting away about, our weeks and things going on and TV shows and movies. And I haven't even asked Chris what he thought about this episode. So, it's going to be interesting to get into this with just the two of us. The 13th episode of Star Wars The Bad Batch, episode 16 is the final one for the season. So only 3 more after this episode. And after the big, I suppose, Ryloth arc, that we talked about the last 2 episodes have been really, really good. And now a smaller episode for episode 13.
Yeah, that's unlucky 13, someone might say. Some may say lucky 13. You'll have to keep listening to find out which it is in our opinions. But if you're joining us for Lucky 13 for the first time, head on over to tvpodcastindustries.com where you can subscribe to us on any trooping or cloned podcast player, catcher, and beyond. We're on all the usual spots. But you can also head on over to TV Podcast Industries to leave us a voicemail and give us your feedback on each individual episode, or towards the end of the season, give us your old wrap-up. Don't want to hear your voice, your own dulcet tones on this podcast? Why not head on and just give us a quick email to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com and we will read it out. That's too much. Why not head on over to facebook.com/groups/TV Podcast Industries where we have a spoiler post for each and every episode. And you can just, Derek will make sure it's there a few minutes after the shows go live, and you can type in your thoughts and we'll read them out at the end of our recording.
Yes, while I'm sitting there eating my cereal, watching The Bad Batch, I usually post up
Saturday morning cartoons. In this case, it's Friday morning cartoons.
Exactly. And we've also finished our coverage of Loki. We did our wrap-up episode, finished our pub quiz, and awarded our Loki goodies to Salim Akizler, who has won the pub quiz for this season. We'll be back with another pub quiz on the next Marvel podcast that we're doing, which is What If next month, staying with animation for a while, which is really good because we've done a lot of animation this year. Remember at the start of the year we were saying we hadn't done anything before we did Invincible, and now this is going to be our third animation podcast as we get into August, which is cool. But let's get into Star Wars The Bad Batch, Chris.
We shall. Well, before we even jump into the synopsis, do you want to tell us who gave us what?
Yes, I will. Executive producer on this show every week, Dave Filoni and Jennifer Corbett. This episode was written by Amanda Rose Muñoz, who wrote episode 6 of this show and was a script supervisor on all of the other animated Star Wars shows. Also, someone else that's over from all of the other Star Wars animated shows is director Saul Ruiz. Directed 5 episodes so far of this season, 6th episode, I think, if I've got my count right, and also directed on many of the other animated shows as well.
Yes. Well, they definitely gave us an episode. Do you want to tell us exactly what they gave us with your synopsis?
Sure. When the Bad Batch return to Ord Mantell from another dangerous job for Sid, they find that she has been ousted by a young smuggler named Roland Durand. Hunter decides they must escape, but Sid is waiting for them at their ship. She threatens to expose them unless they help her get her parlor back. As Roland is trying to prove he's a capable smuggler, Sid wants to embarrass him in front of his clients from the Pyke Syndicate. They're going to use Ord Mantell's vast cave network to sneak back to Sid's former office and steal the shipment, 6 cases of spice, before the Pykes can collect. There are only a few problems. They have to traverse the cave network in silence as it's infested with dangerous creatures called earlings, and Sid has entrusted her barflies, Bollo and Ketch, to create a distraction by kidnapping Durand's pet Ruby. Ruby proves too difficult to handle for the drunken duo, and Durand is on the Bad Batch's trail far sooner than Sid had hoped. As Sid and the Bad Batch race back through the mines with the stolen spice, pursued by Durand's forces, the commotion awakens the hive of earlings. They narrowly escape the dangerous attackers, but lose the spice at the centre of the tunnels. When Durand's clients arrive, they are furious at the situation. They kill his forces, capture Durand, and threaten to make his entire family pay for this slight. The Pykes hold Amiga hostage, and force the Bad Batch to retrieve the spice or the kid gets it. Once Tech has figured out that the Earlings are sensitive to all forms of light, Sid and Wrecker are able to recover the drugs and return them to the Pyke Syndicate, resolving the problem. Despite protests from Sid and Amiga, Durand has a horn removed by the Pykes as punishment for his failure. As they leave, the Pykes' actions may have brought them head-to-head with Ronald's notorious mother, Issa Durand.
There you have it, folks. Definitely an episode of The Bad Batch. We'll get into it, but before I even colour anyone's judgment, Derek, what did you think of this episode?
I have said before when we have episodes of the show, what I try and look for are things that may connect it to the future of the show. What's kind of interesting about the show is there's a lot of new characters introduced here, with Ronald Durand and his league that come in and take over from Sid. They're brand new. I haven't seen them before. He seems to mention them, mentions his mother as if she's this massive figure in books or comics or some other form of Star Wars, and she's not. The only people that are the Pyke Syndicate, which we will talk about in our main blaster points for the episode. We'll talk a little bit about the Pyke Syndicate, who they are and what they're about. But it seemed like, oh, okay, well, you're setting something up potentially for the future, but the basics of the story are they get back. Sid has her business gone. She's been ousted by somebody else, and then the episode ends and everybody leaves and Sid has her business back, which is the traditional definition of a filler episode, right?
Yeah. So this was my one problem with this episode, because it was a fun jaunt. It was interesting. I did actually think potentially that the Durands were a big thing from Rebels that I just wasn't aware of, and I was like, especially with the horn being pulled off, I was hoping that was maybe the origin of him, and you always you never know how he had lost his horn, and now we find out how he lost his horn. That answers that question. It's not.
It's not.
But, okay.
Because I've never seen it before, yeah. I kept thinking, because there is a background character, I'm sure you remember this from when you were a kid, Chris, in Star Wars A New Hope, there was a character that looked exactly like the devil that was in the background. Yes. 2 horns, red skin, but this guy's got green skin, so I was like, I guess he's the same species as that character. But he's not the same character, so I was put off guard from the start on that. But no, nothing in existence before, but we will see if it will play into something else in the future. Exactly. I think my final line of the synopsis makes me think we're having 2 syndicates going up against each other, with the Pykes threatening and taking the horn of Ronald Durand, and the mention of what Issa Durand, his mother, could possibly do in the future makes you think that these 2 may go up against each other in a future episode or a future season.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting. But just as we get into it, do want to call out spice.
Yes.
We are in the week where the first trailer for Dune has dropped. And central character point as its own is the spice melange in Dune's, Frank Herbert's Dune universe. And in this week, it's almost like Disney went, you know what? Here, we're dropping our spice as well. You know what? You get, hey, spice for everyone.
Oh,
Different
Chris,
type of spice, but...
Do you not remember how Han Solo sold himself as doing the Kessel run for the spice mines? He was, the spice has been a central part of the Star Wars mythos. You know, it took me years because we watched those movies when we were kids. It took me years to realize that spice was effectively the heroine of the Star Wars galaxy. I'd never connected it. I was like, oh, they want spice. So spice when you're a kid is things you put on food. But as the movies go on and as the TV shows go on, you obviously realize that spice is this commodity being traded across the galaxy. Clearly heroin.
So let's get into the discussion of the spice with our first blaster point for this episode.
Yeah.
Sid and the Bad Batch spoil the spice. I like what you did there.
I didn't even know I wrote that. I thought I wrote steal the spice. That was my spelling.
Oh, it's even better. Okay, it was kismet. It was just had to come out like, spoiling the spice because, wow, this was a fun overall. We get, oh no, Sid's gone. Oh no, Sid's dead. No, Sid's alive. Sid's gonna get even, not angry, and steal that spice.
Isn't Sid a much more central character than you thought she was going to be, with voiced by Rhea Perlman? When we saw her on the start of the show, we were all excited because we were going, I didn't expect Rhea Perlman to be doing a voice on this Star Wars TV show. And she seems much bigger character than she has been in the past. And we've kind of mentioned a few times about whether the Bad Batch are going to like sever ties with Sid now that they have accomplished a number of things over the course of the show, and then suddenly they're back here after another mission that they've done. Another few weeks have passed since they had that adventure on Ryloth, effectively. So I just wasn't expecting them to be back in the same situation. But that's why these kind of episodes, these kind of one-off adventure episodes happen. It feels really like second season of Clone Wars more than anything else, because it's
Can
just
we clarify
a simple
that
adventure.
It is a couple of weeks. Because
a few days or a few weeks, yeah.
Yeah, because the way...
Some time has passed, let's say.
Okay, I get that. The way they were just describing it, though, when they were talking about they're just coming back from that other job, to be fair, it just breezed over my head. That I just thought they were literally talking about last week's episode and escaping last week.
Right.
But no, okay, that makes even more sense. So this does bring me back to... Why are they back with Sid?
We had speculated that they might have been finishing up with Sid because they didn't need it. But again, as we said before, this is how you get your central idea of them being able to go off on little missions here and there for an episode that doesn't play into the overall situation. Like at the start of this episode, when we see Durand's men standing around the room, I was going, hang on a second, is that Crosshair's men? Have they found him already? Because that was the setup at the end of last week's episode. But this doesn't play into that. It's kind of just saying there's been a bit of a passage of time. So potentially that's how Crosshair will catch up with them, because he has had some time now between the last episode and when he will catch up with them as the rest of the episodes go on. So I think it's just, that's partly what this does to it. This episode is there for and there to accomplish, is just to say there are other things going on. So it doesn't feel like when you have them being tracked by Crosshair, he doesn't just appear the next day. He could have done that any time, but if you have an episode that shows a passage of time, it means it's taken him a little bit longer to find them effectively. Yeah. So that's one of the accomplishments. One other thing I want to point out about these kind of episodes is this is an animated show, and people who work in animation really want to show off their skills. And there's a couple of moments in this episode, particularly in this initial scene with Sid going to take the 6 cases of spice from her office and going through those caves. There's a couple of moments in those scenes that are so well animated and really show off the skills of the team behind this show. It felt like something out of Aliens in some moments where
exactly that's where my head went.
Yeah, like where Wrecker dropped his torch into the hole, the hive where these Earlings are living, and you see it kind of clanging down. The lighting in that is amazing. It looks really live action at moments, and then there's a really good tension that's being held there by the sounds that are going on, the echoing of the noise that's going on. And this is what people who work in animation want to do, is show off what they can now do these days with their skills. And I think they've really done a great job. It felt really tense in those moments for the episode that's in it.
Yeah, no, I agree. For me, it was actually I call it the Batman moment, but it's not really. The swarm of the bugs. That when they were literally flying around and swarming the mine carts. Yeah. That was the spectacular moment for me.
As they were ripping them apart and taking all of Durand's men, and they were all falling and dying effectively. Yeah.
Again, did you notice that? Just a random splatter and one guy's head nearly got taken off. I was like, you covered it well, but that's going to hurt. That's going to smart in the morning.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But I suppose that's what I really took out of this episode and those moments is just how great they looked. I like that Sid had a plan from the story. I like that Sid had a plan to get them out of this. I kind of liked her using the two barflies because they want their bar back since her place has just been completely taken over now that Durand is in there. He seems pretty successful if he's only taken that place over a few days ago, right?
Yeah.
Because the whole bar is completely packed, you know? You see him going up and getting...
more successful.
Oh, much more successful. Yeah, you see him going up right behind the bartender that he has now. It's not Sid just tending bar to the two guys anymore. It's a bartender with lots of bottles of what I suspect is Star Wars type champagne behind them. So the place has been quite a success with Durand taking over. But he's a young upstart. Sid has the ways of taking care of him. Another touch I was interested in, when they have to go back to pick up the spice, which had all been knocked off their ship that they were carrying it on. It's Wrecker and Sid that go and pick it up. Just showing how strong Sid actually is, because Wrecker, understandably, he's genetically modified to be able to be strong enough to carry anything he wants to carry. He's basically able to lift a tank over his head if he wants to, and you see him lifting these crates over his head. Sid's really strong. She's stronger than it seemed like any of the other Bad Batch could have done that job, but she takes on the job to do it herself because she's that strong. So I thought that was quite an interesting touch.
I thought it was interesting. I always assumed from the body type, very kind of like squatty with big arms.
That's why people don't mess with Sid.
Yeah, pretty much. But I always had envisioned that kind of ape almost kind of body type. So yes, you would think gorilla type of kind of.
There you go.
I enjoy as the aside part. This was Goonies-esque kind of aliens, bit of Prometheus thrown in there. With the Goonies already the kind of mine carts and beyond. It was a
Indiana
fun
Jones,
romp.
Chris. Indiana Jones.
That too. Yeah.
There was no mine carts in Goonies.
Oh God, am I really getting my 80s John Williams that messed up?
It's only because I watched the Goonies earlier this week.
Oh God. Are you okay? Do you want to talk about it?
It's one of John's favourite movies and he wanted to watch it, so we watched it.
It's still one of my favourites. Shuffle to the max.
There you go.
But yes, I enjoyed the overall kind of spoiling the spice caper, if you will. It was fun. It was just it was an interesting diversion, we'll call it that.
Yeah, I think, again, throughout these episodes when we're podcasting about them, I am looking to see what I can pick out for the future. I couldn't pick out too much here, couldn't pick out too much of the connections, but the adventure was a fun little adventure for the Bad Batch, and everything is back to normal by the end of the episode, which, that's our kickoff point for the last three, hopefully, and hopefully all three will be connected, much closer than this one is.
Don't say that. Now you've said it. You know it's not going to happen.
No, all three episodes are going to be completely disconnected.
Exactly, and it's the final 10 minutes. Yep. No, nothing else on Sid and the Bad Batch. I'm very interested, and I do want to talk about Blast Point number 2, so I'm going to move it on, which is take what you want. It's the Durand way.
Yeah, like there's something about this show. One of the central themes of this show since the beginning really has been about, Omega growing up with her chosen family, effectively. So, one of the things we've seen throughout is different types of families. Every family is different, and the way every parent deals with their children has been different. So, here we're seeing someone that's a product of, a pretty terrifying mother by the sounds of things from Issa Durand, is mentioned by Roland Durand when he and Omega are having their discussion when the two of them are captured, and he's saying, this was the whole thing I was taught growing up, was just take what you want, effectively, and nobody should mess with me and what I do. And I like that Omega's response to it is that what your mother taught you? And he's going, yeah, she'd be embarrassed by me being captured, basically, because she's a terrifying woman who has done this her whole life. So I like that that's a little connection between the two characters, that that his mother has done, has turned him into what he is, I suppose. Whereas has grown very well being surrounded by the Bad Batch. She's very compassionate. She even tries to save him, even though he's the one responsible for everything that's going on. So I think that's a bit of the connection that's in here for the episode.
Yeah, again, I took it versus nature versus nurture. Mm-hmm. Where it's also with poor old Ronald. He is a product of both the environment and his mother. The first initial introduction for Ronald for me was, this is cool. Like, he's playing the part. Well, we learned he was playing the part, but he was that kind of what I thought was going to be the young, upcoming, kind of gangster, and he was just like ruthless and was just going to kill everyone.
Yeah.
And the flip on it, that is like, he is, but he's more just trying to prove he's capable, and his mother's 10 times worse, but he's not that bad, really. Yeah. It's not his fault. I get get this as a kid show. Yeah. But, the himself being saved at the end, I don't know how that's going to turn out, because he is a ruthless gangster. Yeah.
He's starting on the path. I think that's the thing. He's trying to prove that he has these capabilities and these abilities. Sid, being much more experienced, knows that he's just trying it on, effectively. He's seen an opportunity and thinks this is the way of making his name, effectively. But he didn't plan on having the Bad Batch and Sid on his case, really, did he? So, which I really like. But again, the choice that's there with Sid to embarrass him, effectively, is the best way to get rid of this guy. You embarrass him in front of his clients, the Pyke Syndicate, and that will get him off your case. That will get him out of trying this again, because he won't feel comfortable dealing with them again. So he's terrified from the moment the Pikes arrive, because he thought this was just going to be a simple job. He's going to get them their spice, have a deal, has a bar, has a base now, and this will just be a simple job. But everybody seems to know in the galaxy you don't mess with the Pikes. So I like that that's the plan from Sid, is as I say, to embarrass him and undercut this idea that he has of just jumping into this life.
Yeah, I didn't take it that he was embarrassed. More that he was fearful that he would be killed.
Well, absolutely, yeah.
Like, that was the I think is this. You dance with the devil and get the horns type. If that's that adage I can invoke.
But he has the horns, Chris.
It's true. But they had horns in their face down the bottom.
Dance with the devil and you'll lose a horn.
Okay,
there you go.
Even better and on point.
There you go.
My only problem with this is that, and again, it will only be a problem at the end of the series.
Right.
If there is no further Durand presence. If we get Issa Durand, or we get the Durand Syndicate, and if they were part of, or a key member of the Shadow Collective, i.e. like Darth Maul's kind of crime syndicate that we found out in, like, say, for example, I think it was the end of Solo. We saw. Yes. We saw him there. Now, it had been in, I think it was Clone Wars, he was reintroduced and things like that.
He was, yep.
Yeah. But in the more updated cinematic universe, it was Han Solo's story. That
was a big surprise, yeah.
Yes, exactly. And everyone was like, who? Dead? Why?
Yeah, especially people who hadn't seen Clone Wars. It was a
lot of people, yeah.
Absolutely.
But if they were a major part of that syndicate, or if they are going to be some huge element of something, then this makes sense. If they aren't,
Yeah.
then they are literally a story foil. They are a literally, it's not a great use of this episode.
Yeah, because you'd expect something like this would allow you to learn something new about the characters you already know. If it's a one-off story, you should learn something new about the Bad Batch, or learn something new about Omega, or learn something new about Sid. What we already knew Sid was a pretty badass kind of character. We knew that she's able to protect herself and she has a plan. That's always been her. Nothing else really learnt about the rest of the characters that we didn't know already, at least at this time in the season. So you're right. Maybe there is something coming up. But that said, Chris, it is interesting you mentioned the Shadow Collective, because let's blaster point number 3 at the spice-loving Pikes are future members of the Shadow Collective under Darth Maul, at least those that survive.
They are.
Yes. So we have seen Pikes before. We've seen them in Clone Wars. They played a big part in multiple episodes, including episodes right up to season 7. Do you remember the Mantell sisters that we had earlier on in this season, Chris?
Yeah, I do.
The sisters that were working with Omega. They had a run-in with the Pikes over on Clone Wars as well. So effectively, the Pikes control pretty much all of the spice in the galaxy. It runs through them. They either ship it out or they're taking it in to transport it to other people. So whenever you've heard spice, they've been involved. You mentioned Solo, Chris. The Pikes made their live action debut in Solo. There is a quite a big moment on a planet where the Pyke Syndicate is in control and is trying to get slaves working the spice mines. That's where the Wookiees are captured. The whole Wookiee society effectively is there as their slaves. The reason why it's interesting is because we've mentioned the particular scene so many times, the robot revolution of L337, which she creates as a distraction. That's where they're doing their spice mining. So everybody there, that's the Pikes. So there you go. So interesting, they've been in live action, they've been in Clone Wars, and now they're appearing over here on Bad Batch. So weirdly, they're the most important characters that are introduced in this episode to the Bad Batch. And really what's the most interesting thing that we've seen is once they threaten someone in this galaxy, it's pretty likely that that person who's been threatened follows their orders, because everybody seems to be terrified of them. They have this massive syndicate themselves running spice for many, many systems. So there's someone to be scared of is basically what the baggage that they come with into this episode. Once you see them, you're going to have to do exactly what they say. And that happens multiple times in this episode. There's no question from Roland Durand that he's going to get this spice back. The Bad Batch stand up to them, but there's no question from Sid that she's going to comply and do that thing that she said she wasn't going to do. They have to go back to that cave with the earlings in it, even though she was terrified of them the first time they went through. She's much more terrified of what the Pikes will do to her. So that, I think that's quite interesting.
I found them cool. I think that's probably, they are I have to say the great unknown, but they're not the great unknown. they for me are, I did actually forget that they had their live action debut in Solo. I have to go back and watch that actually soon.
It's actually a lot better than I remember. Each time I watch it gets better. Actually, that's probably the way I'll say it.
Yeah, yep. No, I think I'm going to have to go back and watch that again too, just because they seem to be pulling a lot of connection points from some of the more darker, seedier, scum and villainy side of the universe for Bad Batch.
Well, it's one of the big movies really that took place between now and A New Hope, effectively. Yeah. That's one of the next big touch points, and it was trying to touch on those big things that were happening in the galaxy, which Bad Batch is touching on as well. So some point we may start to connect in Rogue One into this show in the future, you know?
Ooh, that's interesting. So yes, so with the Pikes, I never actually thought of spice as being heroin, but that makes even more sense now.
Right.
I just knew it was a drug, but then I'm like, oh, it was when he took the bar out on this one.
Yeah.
And they checked it. I was like, oh, they're not even hiding it now. Well done. Okay.
It's not like a pile of coke in a big bag. It seems like heroin. But again, it's to represent any drug. It's not necessarily saying it is heroin. It's representing any drug that would be shipped in these back channels, I suppose. It's
spice.
Yeah.
It is your mum's tarragon with a bit of, we'll say, curry powder.
Something like that. Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe. All we know is that in the whole Frank Herbert system of Dune, everybody fights over it and destroys planets over this stuff.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, no, so this was interesting. It was fun to see their ferociousness, the ferocity of these guys, that they were like, no, their blood still is needed on this. Like, someone has to pay. Yeah. And then it's, again, Omega saving the day to a degree. Well, say at least saving a Durand's life. Yeah. That he only uses a horn.
See, I'm not even sure if she had anything to do with that. Herself and Sid protest about it because they think he's going to die. But I don't know. I think the Pyke's pretty much saying that they're not going to kill him. They threatened if he didn't get the spice back for them that they would go after his family, kill all of them, and punish all of them as well for what he's done. And then they still take the horn off him. So I'm not too sure whether this was just one of those things. He could still be useful to us, so let's not damage him too much. Let's just take a horn. But it's still quite a significant punishment for him for what happened.
Does his horns not grow back?
I don't know.
It's like you have like this stubby little horn and then this big horn. It's just like, aww, you're stubble.
Looks like Sylvie from Loki. Yeah, just the one horn.
Just the one horn. But there you have it. That kind of covers our main three.
Yeah. There's not a huge amount, as we said, not a huge amount going on in this episode overall, and certainly not a huge amount of connections to the future episode. But a fun little adventure, though.
It was. I just really I'm going to save it for the wrap up. Any notes before we get there?
That was it. Nope, not a huge amount else going on in the episode. Just, as I say, calling out how good the animation is in the episode and how exciting what they've put together in this episode is. In comparison to some of the other animated shows I watch, this is significantly more exciting, even in episodes like this that don't connect to the overall story, or at least haven't yet. I think they do such a great job of making these interesting episodes and making every frame matter.
Yeah, I completely agree. So I'm going to wrap it up there, and we're going to talk about our thoughts. So before I get into mine, what did you overall think of this episode of 13 of Bad Batch Infested?
I've said we're on our 599th episode now, and I've said before I hate rating individual episodes because simply this is the 13th episode of the season. Right now, this would be probably my lowest ranking episode of the season so far if I was to be ranking them. But next week could come along and there could be something brand new. This could be creating, as I say, the battle between possibly the Pyke Syndicate and the Durand Syndicate. That could be the setup for the last three episodes of the season. It was just a fun little adventure. It was distracting for the 22 minutes it was on. Enjoyed it. No particular complaints, no particular praise for this episode. I enjoyed it. I probably wouldn't revisit it very often in the rest of the season unless something massive happened here that we missed. How about yourself, Chris? What do you think overall?
That is exactly how I felt. Your comment. No complaints, but no praise. If anything, I'm leaning closer to the complaints than I am like a 50-50 split. More just because we've always said, that, and it's come from you, which is we don't mind these filler episodes. And it literally is the definition. The status quo was changed at the beginning and then returned by the end. So nothing happened, theoretically, that we know of yet. Again, if the Durands come on to become the next big thing in the break or in the future, if Ronald is a central character, if Sid has started a war, and now she must flee in the beginning of the next, then it's all fine. Yeah. But essentially, we went from point A in a lovely journey and then back to point A. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, well, you've shown us over the last couple of episodes that the story is heating up. Yeah. I feel that this just slammed on the story brakes. It didn't slam on the action, but it slammed on the story brakes. And okay, maybe we get the next 3, and that's just like because it becomes progressively, the pacing needed to slow so that they could progressively build the tension up and up and up and up to the crescendo of the finale. Again, time will tell for these things. Exactly. But I think that's it. No praise, no complaints. It just was. It's not going to be one of those, as of yet we know, one of those must-watch episodes in the future to go back to.
You never know, because every time characters are introduced on screen, I always look up whether they've appeared in previous episodes and then go back and watch the episode or the movie or whatever it is. So the Pykes, for example, I went back and watched those scenes in Solo. So the next time Durand appears in 3 seasons' time, we'll be looking back to this episode to find out how he was introduced and why he's the way he is and why he only has one horn. So you never know. All those things could be important. One thing I completely forgot to mention, Sid's still threatening the Bad Batch at the beginning of this episode. They haven't built up any trust at all. And the Bad Batch either. When they find out her place has been overturned and taken, they just go, all right, that's us off. Get your stuff. Go get some stuff and we'll hop on the Havoc Marauder and off we go to another planet. And Sid's standing there waiting for them, threatening them to say, if you leave now, I'm going to release the information that you've been here, basically. So, still, you'd think by now they would have forged some kind of, boss employee relationship at least, but it seems like it's all based on threats, or they're going to run away at the first opportunity, which I just forgot to mention earlier on.
So old school boss employee tactics.
If I have to be here, I'll be here, and
I will threaten you over it.
There
you have it, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, fellow troopers. That is our thoughts on episode 13, Infested. We also have some feedback from last week's episode, Rescuing Ryloth.
Yes.
First up with an email from Heather S., who wanted to help clarify a few things on the last 2 episodes, specifically on Ryloth.
Yes, she did. Heather actually asked if we wanted to edit down her email for use on air, to edit it down, but I really liked your thoughts, Heather, so I've left the full email in here as is, because I think there's some really good little things that we didn't pick up on.
Perfect. Okay, Heather had this to say. Hey guys, crazy hyacinth bouquet loving American is back in your inbox. Sorry, excuse me, hyacinth bucket.
You got it right the first time, Chris.
Oh, they nearly. This time she feels an insatiable urge to share unimportant Star Wars minutiae. It makes me feel better about wasting my life. Ord Mantell is not dead because canon. Yes, Lucasfilm boxed themselves in post-Disney acquisition and promised all Star Wars media, movie, TV, comics, novels would be canon going forward. Mm-hmm. In this case, there's a canon book called Lords of the Sith, where Ord Mantell appears. It's set on Ryloth and involves Sham Suddola attempting to take out Palpatine and Vader.
Interesting.
Key point is that said novel is set roughly 5 years after the events of this show, meaning good old Cornfritter can't die now without breaking some prior canon.
That's it.
There we are.
Canon. It ties and binds everything, doesn't it?
It is a fickle mistress.
It is.
It really is. Heather went on to say, Star Wars nerds everywhere screamed in terror last week at his apparent death because, well, we're nerds. It's what we do. Your interpretation is actually better storytelling in my opinion, i.e. the Empire is running a scam and he's dead. I'd even buy they intended for the viewers who weren't the 0.0000001% who might know this kind of detail to have that interpretation. Basically, having their cake and eating it too. Bonus, everyone is confused. Yes, Heather. Yes, they are. And yeah. I would... Do you know the worst part about it? And I feel... And best part, worst part? Our folks over at Lucas in Disney, they have a whole department around the lore.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like one of the biggest teams and most important teams is this team that just does nothing but discuss the lore and make sure when things are being discussed that there is no essentially this happening.
Yeah. Well, we heard in the first episode, just after Crosshair had shot Ord Mantell in the head, we do hear the Admiral saying, "You're being charged with attempted murder," and we were going, what do you mean attempted murder? That's clearly murder. Now, John, I can't remember whether John said this in the podcast last week. He did come up with another theory, which was that the brain isn't in the head with this guy because he's a politician. So it could be another political statement from this show. I'm sure John did say that on the podcast because he's very proud of that joke.
And it was good. I did laugh.
Pretty good.
So,
yeah, pretty good.
And it's not often John comes up with a funny and we all laugh. Ooh, I can say that. He's not here.
He's not here. Yeah.
Heather went on to say, one final fun fact. The refining on Ryloth was said in the prior episode to be mining dunium. This is the primary metal used in the Death Star construction. Keep up the great work. Still loving the show. Heather. Thank you, Heather.
Very
All
good,
things point to the moon.
That's no moon, Chris.
Hey.
Excellent. So we just missed out in the mention of what the metal was, but they
Yes.
did mention the metal, and we wouldn't have known what dunium is, effectively. I think Caleb Dyer also sent us an email to clarify that as well, saying the mine in Ryloth is dunium mine. Dunium is an extremely hard metal used in starship hulls, and dunium features very heavily in the novel Thrawn. 2 novels we have to read now, Chris. Lords of the Sith and Thrawn.
Cool. I'm currently knee deep in some comic books.
Uh-huh.
When I take a break, I'll come out and we'll get into those. I think I started Thrawn years ago.
There was an updated Thrawn, so there was the original Grand Admiral Thrawn novels that were put out, and then unfortunately taken out of canon, but he's been put back into canon by the same author who's written a new Thrawn novel featuring Grand Admiral Thrawn, or his
So
rise to
basically he
power.
just photocopied his first one and
He was like, what do I
tweeted
need to change to put this back into canon? It was the best-selling Star Wars novel of all time at the time when it originally came out. So horrible that they had to take it out of canon, but this is Star Wars canon. They're trying to get things all aligned since they're able to do so much more than they were able to do when they only had 3 movies and everything else was in comic books and TV shows and just loads of fan fiction, effectively. So now that they're able to do everything like animated shows and connected TV shows and connected movies, they want to streamline it all. But at least we did get the Thrawn novel as well. I'm also knee deep in comics. Just finished the entire run of Why the Last Man ahead of the release of that in September. I think the TV show's coming to Hulu. So I'm fully finished on Why the Last Man, and it was just as great as I remember.
I'm finishing Invincible for my 4th run. And I don't mean just the first couple of arcs. I'm going full way through start to finish.
So by the time we get to season 2 of Invincible on our podcast, that'll be you'll be fully refreshed again.
Exactly.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Caleb, and thanks, Heather, for both your feedback. We do have some feedback also over on Facebook from Dr. Bob Phillips. He says, nightmare birds and old mine carts and evil snakes and drug running and freefall abseiling all make for an enjoyable half hour. Looking for the story advancement. Sid isn't all bad, and Omega can see the nuggets of good in everyone. Yeah, I get you, Bob. It was quite difficult picking up on story advancement in this episode, but yeah, Omega's very good at seeing the good in anyone she meets, no matter who they are. I kind of like the idea that she says the reason why she wasn't as down on the person that put her in this whole situation was because, well, Ruby the pet, Ruby the creature that is snuggling up to him likes him, so he can't be all bad, right?
100%. I do want to call out Dr. Bob's fantastic use of the ellipsis there. It was just like, looking for the story of advancement, ellipsis.
Dot. There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
I tried to give it my best dramatic reading.
Yes. Pregnant pauses. You gotta love them.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for that feedback, Dr. Bob.
Yes, thanks, Dr. Bob. And one last piece of feedback hot off the presses from Victor Sellers. He says, greetings, fellow troopers. It appears Omega continues to show her brothers the way. Her insistence they help Sid will strengthen the bond with her. The underground carts remind me of scenes from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Wrecker seems to have issues with previously easy tasks. Is he okay? The Pikes seem extremely dangerous. Could they be rivals of the Hutts? I'm not sure where this episode will lead us. Will Roland return as an affable acquaintance or vengeful heavy? Perhaps they should move on before Crosshair tracks them down. Love your podcasts and trooper feedback. Cheers, Victor Von Doom. Thanks, Victor, for your feedback. Something I didn't mention, of course, the Hutts are really important to the galaxy. They're also people that you get spice from, people that are in battle with the other syndicates, of course. Don't know why I didn't mention them earlier on, but yes, the Pikes and the Hutts would probably go up against each other or work with each other, depending on the situation, I suppose. And yes, good point about Wrecker, that you obviously noticed, his trepidation when, being put into the situation with Sid where they had to, climb into the mines. I just took that as his issue that he has with heights, once again rearing its head, this unbeatable tank of a character. has a major aversion to heights, definitely. But thanks, Victor, for your feedback.
And with that, we are at an end to our feedback.
Mm-hmm.
We are at the end of our episode, and you know what that means. Yes, it is time to head on over to patreon.com/TV Podcast Industry, where you can support us for a single intergalactic $1. Mm-hmm. Or you can give us a one-off payment and buy this beautiful editor-in-chief beside me, the man who keeps it all, the wheels turning, the space hamsters running. Yes, you can buy him a coffee over on buymeacoffee.com/TVPI. Can't do
Iced
that.
coffee, please.
Oh, yes. We have a heat wave at the moment, and the sun is beating down on me as I slay the soliloquy. But you don't have the cash to support us. Don't worry. We completely understand. You can head on over to tvpodcastindustry.com, where you can subscribe to each and every single one of our feeds. You can head on over and also leave us a review. Can't do that? Don't worry. You can also just share the podcast, because sharing the podcast is sharing the love. Share it with your opa, your oma, your granny, your granddad. I'm back on the granny trains about sharings at the moment. I don't know why. It came in the last episode and it's sticking. I love grannies and they need to be shared.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they don't need to be shared. But,
no, they don't, because that's actually quite weird.
No, our episodes need to be shared with anybody that'd be interested in hearing them. Exactly. You know, interesting fact this week is we got a shout out when we started our Bad Batch podcast from a Star Wars fan that catalogs all of the podcasts that are out there for Star Wars. Just last week he announced at this stage there were 1,200 podcasts in the world dedicated to just Star Wars. 1,200 podcasts. So thank you to every single one of our wonderful listeners who's listening to our discussions about Star Wars The Bad Batch, because it's very difficult sticking out when there's that much of a universe of podcasting out there. Lots of people who have been doing it for years. Lots of people who've just started looking back at movies. Lots of people who've started looking back at The Mandalorian. And some people, a few of our fellow podcasters covering The Bad Batch as well. So thank you so much for joining us for our coverage of Star Wars The Bad Batch. We'll be back next weekend with our chat about Star Wars The Bad Batch episode 14, Ord Mantall, which airs on Disney Plus from Friday, July 30th. Ord Mantall.
What could that mean?
Sounds like the stormtroopers might be coming, Chris. What do you think?
Dun, 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 dun. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we will be back. Thank you so much. You have a choice in your Star Wars podcast, and we are glad you have chose us. In the immortal words of John, rest in peace. Keep watch, keep listening, keep trooping.
John will be back next week.
Oh, sorry. Yes, he'll be back. It's just, he's playing golf, so I'm assuming he's resting on the green in peace.
To be fair, he's probably at this stage in the bar on the 19th hole, as they always call it, having a drink and some food. So he'll be back next week. We'll be back next week. Thanks so much for joining us. Talk to you next time.
Bye.